glad you're here, because tonight's tale is too strange to read alone. Tonight, you're about to experience something that would make your worst Monday morning feel like a spa day. Picture this. The year is 1840. The British Empire is at its most confidently destructive, and you're standing outside a low, sprawling compound in Patna, India. The air smells wrong, too sweet, too thick, like someone's been boiling honey mixed with industrial waste. This is the Patna Opium Factory, the crown jewel of Britain's drug empire, and you're about to become part of the machinery that turns poppies into colonial profit. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing which corners of the world are drifting off to stories of imperial exploitation. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Patna the way most people do, quietly sore-footed and without ceremony. The road that brought you here isn't paved with ambition or dreams. It's packed dust, edged with scrub, walked thin by others just like you. Too poor to argue, too tired to hope. Maybe it was the tax collector who spoke with soft authority about what your family owed. Maybe it was the landlord who raised your rent after the rains didn't come. Maybe it was your uncle who said the factory paid something, and that something was more than starvation. The Patna Opium Factory doesn't announce itself with grandeur. No towering gates, no impressive architecture, just a series of warehouses stitched together with soot-dark chimneys and sweating stone walls. The British proudly call it the largest opium factory in the world, as if that's something to put on a postcard. But this isn't a factory of gleaming machines and precision engineering. This is a human factory where bodies are the moving parts, and labor is measured in weight breath and how many bricks of concentrated addiction you can produce before your fingers crack open. There's no welcome committee, no orientation packet. Just a guard who barely looks up a ledger thicker than your thigh, and the quiet understanding that you'll fall into place because you already know what happens to people who don't. You've seen it in your neighbors, in the man from your village who left last year and came back too thin to cast a shadow. You remember the way he looked at food like it was a rumor. Inside the compound, the smell hits you like a physical wall. It's not fresh, it's old, treated with vinegar, and left in the sun. There's the scent of sweat, of burnt oil, of something sticky and plant-based that clings to your nostrils and settles in the folds of your clothes. This smell will become part of you, like exhaustion or hunger, constant familiar and never truly gone. The registration process is perfunctory. You tell them your name, they write down something else. It doesn't matter, you're not here to be remembered, you're here to be recorded. A number is assigned, your caste is logged, your village written down, not so anyone can send letters, but so they can tally labor quotas when they need more bodies. You sign nothing. Consent is implied by your hunger. Around you, others wait with the same resigned patience. Young men, older boys, a few women with the sun permanently etched into their skin. No one talks, words take energy, and you'll need every bit for what's coming. Some came because their land was taxed until it disappeared. Some because their husbands drank away the last of the rice. Some because a British officer came to their village with polite threats and made employment sound like opportunity. This isn't opportunity. This is obligation in a different accent. You're assigned sleeping space, if it can be called that. A shared room cramped and low with mats made of reed and burlap. There's no fan, no breeze, just the collective warmth of too many bodies and not enough hope. You sit there, number freshly assigned lungs, still unscarred, watching the sun set behind a chimney, already coughing smoke. You're not a prisoner, but you're very much not free, and the work hasn't even started yet. Before your hands ever touch the poppy gum, before the fumes sink into your chest, someone writes you down. Not in a book of honor, not on a plaque in a ledger. A thick, stiff-bound volume that smells of ink mold and bureaucratic indifference. It doesn't matter if your name is spelled right or even spelled the same way twice. The process isn't for you, it's for them. You are being translated into units, into recordable, sortable, billable labor. They ask you questions, but not with interest. Your name, your father's name, your village, your caste, your age, or something close enough to it. You answer quietly, and they write what they hear, not what you say. If they ask you to repeat yourself, it isn't because they care about accuracy. It's because they missed a syllable and need to make sure the number matches the body. You're given a number written on a slip of coarse paper and logged in the register beside a series of tick marks, fractions, and abbreviations that you do not understand. The number matters more than your face. It's what they'll call when wages are issued, what they'll mark down when daily quotas are reviewed. When someone collapses, they don't shout your name, they shout your number. Sometimes they don't shout at all, just underline it once in red and move to the next entry. Your caste is entered without question. They don't need to test or verify it. Your accent, your clothing, your skin tone, even the way you hold yourself, are already cataloged by someone trained in colonial taxonomy. If you're low caste, your duties will involve more contact with the raw gum, more skin exposure, less supervision. If you're upper caste, you'll be steered toward clerical work or light sorting, something less degrading, but only if there's space. For most, the difference is academic. You still breathe the same air, still sweat through the same cloth, but the hierarchy is preserved, written down in black ink, and treated like divine truth. There are columns in the ledger for everything: age bracket, caste designation, work assignment, last recorded absence, estimated output per shift. It is a system designed to ensure that no one becomes anything more than predictable. The British call it efficiency. You call it flattening your life with all its private humiliations and tiny hopes has been collapsed into a few short lines in a book you're never allowed to read. Somewhere in that book is a space for your death too. Not immediately, but eventually. They'll record the date. The reason will be vague. Heat stroke, fatigue, illness, but it'll be there written in the same tidy hand that logged your arrival. Once you're logged, you're marked physically. Sometimes it's ink on your wrist, temporary and crude. Sometimes it's a tag tied with string and pinned through your tunic. You feel ridiculous wearing it like livestock, but you learn quickly that not wearing it is worse. Without it, you're not a worker, you're a vagrant. You're not docked pay, you're removed entirely. The system has no time for anomalies. The caste system here operates with mechanical precision. Historians still argue whether British colonial policy deliberately reinforced casted divisions or simply exploited existing ones. But standing in this registration hall, the academic debate feels irrelevant. What matters is that a Brahmin boy doesn't work with gum. He fetches water, carries messages, and sometimes checks weight tallies under a clerk's supervision. His clothes are cleaner, his fingers uncracked. He doesn't speak to you directly. If he needs you to move, he gestures. The Muslim worker you glimpsed earlier is assigned to a different room entirely. His tools are separate, his station isolated not by law, by arrangement. Someone somewhere decided it would be easier that way. Fewer complaints, fewer risks of contamination. You don't know what would happen if your work touched his. You don't ask. There are sweepers who sleep in a different part of the compound, closer to the drains, farther from the storage rooms. You hear them sometimes after hours, coughing, scraping waste into buckets, muttering to each other in low voices. Their job is to clean what everyone else leaves behind. No one says it, but you've seen the looks. No one shares utensils with them. If they bathe, they do it last. If they die, they're replaced without a word. The factory doesn't enforce caste. It doesn't have to. It simply accommodates. It builds around it, profits from it. Tasks are assigned not based on ability, but on acceptability. A low caste worker handles the gum. A higher caste clerk handles the numbers. Everyone's body is worth something different. You're not given a tour, not told what to expect. A supervisor gestures vaguely toward a long corridor, and you follow because there's nothing else to do. As you walk, you pass other workers in varying stages of fatigue. Some are barefoot, some wear headscarves soaked with sweat. No one meets your eyes not to be cruel, but because they already know how this ends, and it doesn't end with friendship. The building where all this happens is not grand, just a low room with barred windows and a slanted desk. But inside, power hums. Not violently, not loudly, just constantly. The clerks sit higher than you, the paper sits higher than them. The man with the ink pot is in no rush. He'll log a dozen more names after you and forget each one in the time it takes the page to dry. By the time you leave the registration hall, you're not the person who walked in. That person had a name, a past, maybe even a story worth telling. The one leaving has a number, a quota, and a place on the factory floor. You haven't been stripped bare. You've been clothed in something worse, anonymity wrapped in arithmetic. The bell doesn't chime, it clatters. A dull, metallic warning that the day has already started without you. It's not melodic, not ceremonial. It rings the way hunger feels consistent, or disinterested and impossible to ignore. You wake with your jaw clenched and your joints unwilling. There's no sunrise to greet just a dim grayness leaking through the cracks in the dormitory walls and the shifting weight of bodies around you as others rise, rub their faces, and shuffle toward the door. No one speaks. Words take energy, energy takes food, and you'll need both for the shift ahead. You roll up your mat and tuck it under a corner so it doesn't disappear while you're gone. Theft isn't common exactly, but nothing truly belongs to anyone here. What isn't used quickly is used by someone else. You splash water on your face from a communal basin, careful not to drink. The taste of the factory clings to the water, metallic and earthy, as if it remembers the poppy fields and resents what you've done to them. You dry your hands on your tunic. It's already stained from yesterday. It always is. There's no such thing as clean clothes in this place, only slightly less ruined ones. By the time you step outside, the courtyard is already half filled with figures just like you, barefoot or in worn sandals bent at the waist from sleep or age or both. No one is running. There's no point. The factory bell doesn't punish lateness with urgency. It punishes it with docked pay-cold stares and the quiet subtraction of privileges you barely noticed you had. The smell hits you before you reach the gate. It's not new, it never is, but each morning it asserts itself again, like a reminder of who's really in charge. It's not just the poppy, though, that alone would be enough. It's the oil from the presses, the reek of human waste from open drains, the acrid tang of lime used to wash down the packing floors, and something else that's harder to name, a sour, sticky humidity that settles into your skin and makes you feel like you've never bathed in your life. You don't smell like a person anymore. You smell like process. You line up at the main entrance, pressed between bodies, all of you avoiding eye contact, because the day is already too long. A clerk with a chalkboard calls numbers. Not names. Names would require memory. Numbers are easier to erase. Yours comes up. You nod, you shuffle forward. Someone marks you present with a thin line on a tally sheet, and that's it. You now exist, but only for today. Inside the compound, the sound changes. It's not loud, not yet, just a low thrum of wooden doors, of footsteps on brick, of the first echoes of movement from the processing rooms. You pass an older worker sweeping the floor. He doesn't look up. He's done this too many times. His broom is worn nearly to the handle. He pushes it in the same tired arc with the same tired rhythm. You wonder how many years it took to become invisible, even while moving. Probably fewer than you'd like to believe. The path to your station isn't marked, you just know it. You've been told once and expected to remember. If you forget, you'll be told again, but not kindly. You pass the drying yard, where rows of opium bricks from yesterday's shift sit under tarps, their surfaces hardening in the sun like old wax. The guards watch those piles more closely than they watch the workers. Each brick is counted, weighed, and reweighed. You're not trusted with them until they're worthless to anyone but the British. Your feet stick slightly as you walk, not from mud, but from the residue that builds up in the crevices of the stone floors. Layers of crushed poppy, spilled gum dust, and sweat baked into something between glue and rot. You don't look down anymore. You don't need to. The path is memorized by pain, each twist in the corridor, each uneven tile, each loose shutter that clicks when the wind hits it, just so. The others around you are just as silent. The silence isn't fear, not exactly, it's preservation. If you waste energy talking, you pay for it. Later in sweat, in breath, in sore hands that can't keep up with the pace. There's a kind of camaraderie in the quiet. Not friendship, not warmth, just shared understanding. You nod to someone you vaguely recognize. He nods back. That's enough. As you near the main hall, the heat intensifies. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the building is already warmer than outside. The brick absorbs the night's sweat and gives it back in waves. You feel it on your neck, your ribs, the backs of your knees. By midday, it will be worse. The air inside doesn't move. It thickens, becomes something you have to push against just to breathe. You've learned to take shallow breaths here. Deep ones invite too much of whatever it is that coats your throat and settles in your lungs like sediment. The British incidentally produced an estimated 4,000 chests of opium annually from Patna alone during this period, each chest containing about 140 pounds of the drug. That's roughly $560,000 pounds of processed addiction leaving this facility every year, shaped by hands like yours. You reach your post just before the second bell, the one that means labor, not attendance. The overseer walks past without looking at you. That's good. If he looks something's wrong, you sit on the mat you've been using all week. It smells like the floor and feels like fatigue. You flex your fingers, already aching, already sticky. The raw gum is waiting dark and heavy in its clay pot. The tools are beside it, blunt, stained, indifferent. You hear someone cough behind you, a wet, rattling sound that goes ignored. And then, as if pulled forward by gravity, the day begins. You don't sit in a chair, there are no chairs. There are mats if you're lucky. Otherwise, you crouch on your haunches like your ancestors did. Not out of reverence for tradition, but because the factory never invested in comfort. Comfort is inefficient. So you squat back, curled knees, creaking arms braced against your thighs. The position hurts less than standing, but more than nothing. After a few hours, your feet fall asleep and your hips feel like they've aged decades. That's normal. Everyone around you looks the same folded inward joint by joint like laundry with breath. In front of you is the gum. Not in neat blocks, not yet, just a heavy sticky mass that smells like scorched honey and sewage. It oozes slowly from its container, spreading across the clay slab like it's trying to escape. You reach into it with a wooden paddle, not a tool of precision, just something shaped to stir and scrape. It sticks to everything: your hands, your arms, your knees when you adjust position. It clings with the urgency of rot and doesn't let go. You'll scrub later, but the smell never leaves. It gets into your pores, into your teeth, into places no soap can reach. Your hands are already stained, everyone's are. After the first week, the tips of your fingers turn brown, then nearly black. Not from dye, not from dirt, from absorption, from contact, from scraping gum off stone, off trays, off your own skin. You watch your nails darken, crack peel, and then reform harder than before. The factory gives no gloves. If you ask, they'll say you don't need them. They'll say the British soldiers in China handled the product bare-handed too. They won't mention how many of them lost their fingertips or how many went home with lungs full of resin and silence. You try to be careful, try not to waste. The overseer doesn't need to hover. The quota does that for him. You're expected to process a fixed amount per day, no exceptions. Too much gum left in your tray, you get docked. Gum stuck to your tools. That's your fault. If you work fast, you're watched. If you work slow, you're watched harder. There's no right speed, only barely acceptable and borderline punishable. The tools are not sharp, that would be dangerous. A sharp edge means more accidents, more bleeding, more contamination. So everything is dull. The paddles, the scrapers, the shaping molds. That means more pressure, more friction, more work. The wooden edges tear at the gum and at your skin. Blisters form, then split, then heal into something rougher. You develop calluses not from pride, but from survival. They don't protect you. They just mean the damage goes deeper before you feel it. Occasionally, you nick yourself, a small cut from a jagged board, a splinter that works its way under your nail. You try not to flinch. Blood is a problem. If it gets in the gum, it has to be discarded. You don't get punished for bleeding exactly. You get punished for loss of material. A few drops can ruin a tray's worth of product, and that's money the factory won't lose lightly. Some of the older workers wear bandages, thin soiled strips of cloth wrapped around their fingers, more symbolic than sanitary. You copy them when your hands begin to split. The cloth clings when wet and stiffens when dry. By midday, it smells like the rest of you, sour, bitter chemical. The air around your station is thick with more than heat. The gum releases vapors as you work it sweet at first, then cloying, then nauseating. It's not the clean scent of poppies in a field. It's the concentrated essence of something dying slowly into profit. You breathe it because you have to, but your body resents it. Your throat scratches with every exhale. Your nose clogs not with dust, but with scent thick, persistent, invasive. Here's something the history books rarely mention. Opium workers often developed a tolerance to the drug simply from handling it. Not addiction exactly, but a dulling of the senses, a clouding of sharp edges. Whether this was intentional, a way to keep workers compliant, historians still argue whether this was accidental byproduct or calculated management. What's certain is that after a few weeks, your thoughts come slower, time blurs more easily, and the edges of pain feel softer than they should. You work close to one of the larger vats today. It's open and shallow with a layer of half-processed resin spread across its surface like oil-slicked mud. The smell rises steadily, thick, intoxicating wrong. Not seductive like the poppy fields, not medicinal like a tonic, just cloying. It makes your head feel loose, not dizzy exactly, just detached, like you're watching your hands move from a small distance. The rhythm becomes automatic scoop press, shape smooth. Your fingers move like they belong to someone else, someone less tired, someone less aware. You lose track of time more easily now. Minutes feel like hours. Hours compress into moments. The gum seems to pulse under your hands, warm and alive, and somehow patient, as if it knows it will outlast you. You get one break, not timed by the clock, but by routine. When the trays are full, when the bell rings, when someone higher up decides the day has reached its midpoint, you stretch your legs and feel them tremble under your weight. You rub your hands and feel the stiffness setting in. You glance down and see the gum has worked its way under your nails again. You'll try to scrape it out tonight with a piece of wire or a fingernail from your other hand. It won't work. No one is congratulated for meeting quota. No one is thanked for diligence. Recognition is not part of the arrangement. The only reward for meeting expectations is not being punished. If you fall behind, someone will notice not right away, but eventually. A mark will appear in the ledger, a deduction from your wages. If it happens more than once, you'll be moved to a different station, one closer to the boiling vats, one with worse air, fewer tools, more gum to handle. And if that doesn't fix the problem, you'll be dismissed. Dismissal sounds like freedom, but it isn't. It means losing your dormitory bed, your rationed meals, your water access. It means returning to whatever pushed you here in the first place, debt, drought, hunger. So you keep working. You push your fingers deeper into the gum, even when they sting. You force the paste into molds, shape the bricks, smooth the edges. Your hands move like they belong to someone else, someone less tired, someone less aware. By the end of the day, you don't look at your hands anymore. You just rinse them in the same basin as everyone else, watching the water turn brown, then darker. The next day comes without announcement. No dreams, no real sleep, just another bell, another basin of stale water, and the same gum waiting in the same tray. Your body moves before your mind catches up. The routine is already inside you. By mid-morning, your hands are sticky again, your breath shallow, and that's when you hear it, the familiar rhythm of leather soles on brick. The overseer has begun his rounds. You hear his footsteps before you see him. Not loud, not hurried, just consistent hard soles on hard floors, measuring distance and ownership. He doesn't speak, he doesn't have to. His presence announces itself in posture, in tempo, in the faint scrape of a clipboard across his hip. You keep your head down, everyone does. Not out of fear exactly, but out of habit, the same way. You avoid staring at the sun. Too much attention draws heat. The overseer moves through the processing hall like he's auditing a part of himself. He doesn't rush, he doesn't stop. He glides past stations, occasionally pausing to write something. Never quickly, never clearly. He doesn't point out mistakes, doesn't issue praise, he observes. That's the job. The factory may belong to the East India Company or the Crown, but the floor belongs to him. Every cough, every dropped paddle, every gram of gum that looks too dry or too moist is a note in his private symphony of control. You've never heard him raise his voice that would imply emotion, and emotion would imply investment. Instead, he simply shifts weight when something displeases him. A half step backward, a wrinkle in the brow, a glance that lingers 1 second too long. You come to recognize these cues the way sailors watch the sky. He's not here to teach or to lead. He's here to enforce calibration. His ideal worker is silent, fast, exact, and invisible. You do your best to become that. Sometimes he stops behind you, not to speak, but to measure. You hear the scratch of his pen, the turn of the page. He's logging how much gum you've processed, how clean your tools are, how closely your bricks match the mold. If he doesn't move on quickly, your stomach knots. He might circle around to the other side and peer over your shoulder, not to offer correction, but to confirm suspicion. He won't say anything. He'll just underline your number in the ledger and walk away. The consequences come later. There's no conversation, not with you. He may speak to the senior clerk in English quickly and quietly, like someone discussing the price of cattle. You don't understand most of it. Occasionally, you catch a word: inefficient, replacement, unsanitary. You learn to associate these words with dread, the way animals learn the scent of smoke before they see the fire. His clothes are always clean, not perfectly pressed. The factory isn't that formal, but neat. Untouched by gum, untouched by labor. His shoes never carry dust. His hands never show stain. You imagine he bathes more often than you're allowed to, that he sleeps alone in a private room with a fan and a lock on the door. He looks healthy, that's the most frustrating part. In a place that depletes everyone, he seems untouched, preserved like the factory draws from you so it can feed him. The quota system operates with mathematical precision. Each worker is expected to produce exactly 12 shaped bricks per day. Any fewer triggers a wage deduction, any more draws suspicion of corner cutting. The British discovered early that quotas worked better than whips. Numbers are harder to argue with than violence. You can protest a beating, but you can't negotiate with arithmetic. Your wages themselves are almost insulting. A few annas, enough for rice, maybe a bit of oil, but not enough to build anything, not enough to plan. The coins feel temporary in your hand, like they'll melt if you grip them too long. Some workers send their pay home. Others spend it on tobacco or betel nut, not because they can afford to, but because they can't afford to feel every hour of the day with nothing to take the edge off. Fines are levied for everything, not just low output, but for cracked bricks, for spilled gum, for tardiness, even if the bell rang 5 seconds early, for damaged tools, even if those tools were already splintering when you pick them up. Once you saw a worker fined for speaking during wrapping, though no one had heard him say a word. It didn't matter. The accusation stuck, the deduction followed. The books are always balanced, even if it's your stomach that stays empty. You start to understand that the factory doesn't need to punish you with violence. The numbers do it better. The numbers are impersonal, silent, permanent. They're recorded in ink that doesn't fade and never forgives. You could work 6 days without error and still find your total docked on the 7th because of a mistake made in passing one you didn't even notice. Accidents happen. That's what they say when they don't want to take responsibility. But in the factory, accidents aren't random. They're scheduled, expected, built into the routine, like the lunch bell or the weekly quotas. This morning, the boy next to you slices his palm open on a cracked mold handle. The wooden edge had sheared into a blade after weeks of wear, and today it finally gave way. He jerks back, surprised blood dripping onto the drying bricks. A supervisor eventually notices, mutters something under his breath, and yanks the boy to his feet. The tray is discarded, the bricks are swept away. The boy is sent away not to a doctor, but to somewhere else. You don't know if he'll be back tomorrow. You don't ask. Later, a woman in the boiling room faints. You don't see it happen, but you hear the thud, the kind of sound that pulls your spine straight. Not fear, just awareness. The noise a body makes when it stops cooperating. She's dragged away by 2 others, her feet trailing behind like wet laundry. Someone takes her place before the hour is out. The factory doesn't punish accidents, it simply replaces them. The injury is not the interruption. You are. You're the variable that has to be managed, repositioned, evaluated for continued usefulness. If your cough worsens, you're moved to a cooler station, not for your comfort, but so your output doesn't drop further. If your hands blister too badly, you're given wrapping duty, not out of mercy, but to keep you on the ledger without wasting raw material. The factory isn't cruel, it's pragmatic. Cruelty would require intent. This place runs on indifference. By the time the overseer completes his circuit, the day feels heavier, not because anything has changed, but because you've been reminded of your place in the equation. You return to your gum, your paddle, your quota. The numbers are watching even when he isn't. The cough starts as a tickle, not deep, not alarming, just enough to clear your throat more than usual. At first, you think it's the heat, or the dust, or the steam from the boiling room seeping through the compound's seams. You drink more water, though it tastes of rust and old iron. You chew slowly to avoid swallowing air. You avoid speaking unless necessary, which isn't hard, no one talks much anymore. But the tickle doesn't go away. It deepens, settles in. You aren't alone. Everyone's coughing now, some more than others. The boy 2 mats over wheezes in his sleep. The man in your work crew hacks into his sleeve every half hour, turning away so the overseer doesn't notice. It becomes a rhythm of the place, like the creak of the carts, the scrape of trays, the ring of the quota bell, the sound of lungs emptying without permission. Some coughs are wet, others are dry. A few sound like they come from somewhere deeper than the body should allow. You start to notice who's getting worse. At first, you joke about it, quietly, bitterly. You say it's the factory's way of giving you something to keep, a souvenir made of breath and phlegm, a gift for your service. The others chuckle when they have the strength, not because it's funny, but because there's no other acceptable reaction. You've heard stories everyone has. People who coughed too hard and were sent home not to recover, just to disappear. A young man from the boiling room who hacked up blood one morning and never returned. A woman from the packing tables who stopped speaking altogether and was taken from the dormitory during the night. No one sees them again. No one knows where they go. There's no doctor not here. If someone collapses, a supervisor checks their pulse. If it's still there, they're dragged to the edge of the room and told to wait until they can stand again. If it isn't, a cart is summoned, covered in canvas, always moving briskly, always returning empty. The body is gone before anyone can ask a question. The station is cleaned, the tray reissued, the day continues. Grief is too inefficient to be part of the routine. You start spitting more often into rags, into corners, into the dirt behind the latrine. The mucus is darker now brown, sometimes black, sometimes streaked with things you don't want to identify. You stop looking at it. You tell yourself it's from the gum, all that sticky resin clinging to your throat, lining your teeth, coating your tongue with a bitterness that won't leave. But there's something else, something sour under the sweet. You taste metal, then salt, then nothing at all. Breathing becomes effort, not all at once, but gradually. At first, you just feel short of breath when you stand too quickly, then when you crouch too long, then all the time. You start timing your movements, conserving oxygen like it's coin. You hold your breath through the worst of the fumes. Exhale slowly, pace your stirring so you don't overextend. You become a master of half-breaths, moving through the day like someone underwater. Some nights you wake coughing. It's not loud, not even painful, but it keeps you from sleeping, and that's worse. You lie still in the dark, listening to the chorus of lungs around you, a symphony of damage, an orchestra of expiration. You wonder how long it takes before someone notices you're getting worse. You wonder what happens when they do. The British medical officers of the period documented what they called factory lung, a condition affecting workers in textile mills and other industrial facilities. But opium factory workers were rarely examined, their ailments dismissed as occupational hazards. Historians still argue whether the respiratory damage was from the opium itself, the chemical additives used in processing, or simply the concentrated exposure to organic particulates in poorly ventilated spaces. What's documented is that worker turnover was remarkably high, though the reasons were typically recorded as resignation rather than illness. You stop joking. The others do too. No one talks about the cough anymore, not because it's gone, but because it's too present, too real, too shared. It becomes part of the background, like the gum, like the fines, like the overseer's footsteps. You cover your mouth when you cough, not out of politeness, but to hide it, to make it look smaller than it is to protect the illusion that you're still fine, still useful, still above the threshold where people get noticed. You think about the outside world more often now, not longingly, but analytically. You try to remember the last time you felt air that didn't burn a little on the way in. You imagine walking through a field without coughing, sitting by a stove without choking, speaking a full sentence without your voice catching. These thoughts come unbidden, not as hope, but as measurement. You are cataloging your distance from what you used to consider normal. Your hands still work, your back still bends, your eyes still focus. That's enough for the factory. That's all they need to keep your name in the ledger. The rest, your lungs, your throat, your ribs, those aren't measured, not until they stop working entirely. Eventually, the work stops, not all at once, not dramatically. You just disappear from the roster, like so many others. One day, someone else is crouched in your place. They use your paddle, they inherit your mat, they don't ask where you went. No one does. The factory doesn't announce departures, it simply reassigns. Your body is buried or burned or left somewhere quiet, maybe in a ditch, just outside the compound, maybe in your home village, returned under the cover of silence and shame, maybe nowhere at all. Just gone, folded into the soil, into memory, into the dust rising from the road that brought you here. There's no marker, no funeral, no prayer, no letter sent. You are subtracted cleanly, like a miswritten figure corrected in ink. And yet the crates continue, hundreds of them, thousands, still leaving the factory long after your hands have stopped working. They arrive in warehouses in Rangoon, in Canton, in London's East India docks. They're offloaded by dock hands who will never know your name, opened by merchants who only care about the weight, sold by men in waistcoats who speak of margins and markets while their hands stay clean. Years pass. Eventually, someone writes about the factory, not a worker but a scholar perhaps, or a visiting colonial officer with time on his hands. He writes of logistics of supply chains, of the remarkable efficiency of the Patna opium operation. He mentions the number of crates produced each year. He cites revenue figures. He praises the precision of the ledgers. He includes no names, or if he does, they belong to overseers and administrators, men who never touched the gum, men who walked clean corridors and wore white shirts, men who only ever observed. Decades later, the factory becomes history. The buildings remain crumbling a little more each year, eventually preserved, not for their cruelty, but for their craftsmanship. The walls are restored, the ledgers displayed behind glass, the crates, the very ones you packed, sit on pedestals, admired for their uniformity, their branding, their export stamps. Tour guides point out how advanced the process was, how streamlined, how ahead of its time. No one mentions the lungs that bled to make it possible. The story settles now like dust on an abandoned shelf. Your breath, which fought so hard against the thick air of that distant factory, has finally found its rest. The ledgers close, the numbers fade, and somewhere in the soft darkness of your room tonight the weight of history feels a little lighter. These stories, these forgotten breaths, these unnamed hands, they don't demand remembrance so much as acknowledgement. You've given that now in the quiet space between waking and sleep, between comfort and the ghost of other people's pain. The factory walls have crumbled, the overseers have returned to dust, and the empire that built itself on such foundations has learned to call its brutality by softer names. But you've walked those corridors now, felt the gum stick to your fingers, tasted the metal in the air. You've carried someone else's number for a few hours, and that's enough. Rest well tonight, knowing that history's forgotten voices have found in you a listener who didn't turn away. The cough fades, the bell stops ringing, and what remains is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, free, easy, and entirely your own. Sleep comes now, like a benediction, like the end of a shift that finally mercifully ends.